North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Welcome. Glad you're here. Today, we do what we do all days. We bring you news, the real news, analysis for fact from that news, which isn't necessarily anything that actually correlates, because there's so much less fact in news these days. Wouldn't you agree? I made commentary. That's my opinion. Just because I say it doesn't mean it needs to be engraved in granite. It just means that that's what I think. So what about debate? Well, that's the last thing, and that's between you and me, and we talk about the issues of the day, whether you agree with me or not. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the Wells Report. Good to have you here. A huge decision coming out of New York and the Supreme Court of the United States. It happened today. It was one of these amazing Supreme Court cases that we've been waiting for in this session, jam-packed with very important things. This one came down on the side of the Second Amendment. USA Today reports it like this. The Supreme Court has struck down a New York law that requires state residents to have proper cause to carry a handgun in a decision that could make it far easier for millions of Americans to arm themselves in public, as the nation is still reeling from a string of mass shootings. Now, keep something in mind, the last clause of that sentence, still reeling from a string of mass shootings, is biased journalism. The fact is, the Supreme Court handed down a decision about an improper New York law that required state residents to have proper cause to carry a handgun. Well, no one has proper cause. That's the way things are with people trying to get concealed weapons permits across the land in states that have laws that say may issue a concealed weapons permit instead of shall issue a concealed weapons permit to a law-abiding citizen with no criminal record, no problems in his background. In other words, in New York and elsewhere, you no longer have to prove that you have proper cause to somebody who has no reason or interest in granting your request. If indeed you check off all the boxes, if indeed you're a responsible, law-abiding American, they can't stop you from carrying a concealed weapon. Finally, shall issue states like the last two I've lived in, Nevada and Texas, Oklahoma is this way, lots of places are this way, simply say, hey, if you check off the boxes, no problem. And that's the way it should be. The Supreme Court of the United States comes down on the side of the Constitution, the Second Amendment specifically, and says you don't have to petition to be able to at least exercise your Second Amendment rights. Associate Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the opinion for the 6-3 majority, holding the New York law violated the Constitution, signaled that other gun regulations disconnected from what he called the nation's historic tradition of firearms regulation would face similar scrutiny in federal court. Thomas's opinion had the potential to upend the legal landscape around Second Amendment rights at a time when America remains divided over access to guns. Congress, meanwhile, is racing to pass a sweeping package of restrictions in response to recent mass shootings, including one at a Texas elementary school last month. We know of no other constitutional right that an individual may exercise only after demonstrating to government officers some special need, Thomas wrote of the New York law. It's not how the Second Amendment works when it comes to public carry for self-defense. The case was among the most closely watched on this term in a docket full of culture war issues, such as abortion, religious freedom, climate change. The decision drew a fire response from Democrats, including President Joe Biden, and gun control groups who asserted the increasing access to guns will drive additional violence. Doesn't seem to be the case here in Texas, even with the Uvalde shooting. And so we still haven't, by the way, gotten all the details from the Uvalde shooting, by the way. Like, for example, how does a part-time employee uh, 18 years of age. How does this part-time employee afford a brand new Ford pickup truck and two AR-15s? We still don't have that answer. Why don't we have that answer? Well, we got something interesting out of Uvalde today. Some of the city people are saying, now, wait a minute, talking about Texas state law enforcement officials. Hey, now, the Uvalde officials said, hey, wait a minute, you told us to be quiet about this. Now you're throwing this on us? Well, what's that? You'll hear more about that tomorrow on the Wells Report. And so the decision landed at weeks after an 8-day. Okay, that's USA Today getting back into the anti-gun axe grinding. Let's move to Fox News. This is their coverage. The Supreme Court today ruled 6-3 the New York regulations that made it difficult to obtain a license to carry a concealed handgun were unconstitutionally restrictive, and it should be easier to obtain such a license. The existing standard required an applicant to show proper cause for seeking a license and allowed New York officials to exercise discretion in determining whether a person has shown a good enough reason for carrying a firearm. As you know, since there are restrictive gun laws in New York, there is no determination or a good enough reason for a typical citizen, even with a clean record, to show that they need to carry a firearm. Stating that one wished to protect themselves or their property was simply not enough. Excuse me? In this case, this is a quote, in this case, petitioners and respondents agree that ordinary law-abiding citizens have a similar right to carry handguns publicly for their self-defense. We, too, agree and now hold, consistent with Heller and McDonald, two other decisions from the Supreme Court, that the Second and 14th Amendments protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in the court's opinion referencing two previous gun cases, because the state of New York issues public carry licenses only when an applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense, we conclude the state's licensing regime violates the Constitution. Finally, Thomas has noted the state statute does not define what proper cause means, and the courts had ruled that the standard was met by people who showed a special need for self-protection. This special need standard is demanding, Thomas wrote. For example, living or working in an area noted for criminal activity does not suffice. See what I mean? So you work in a bad part of town, but you can't carry a weapon to defend yourself? You can't have a concealed weapons license? You know what's going to happen? Everybody's worried, my God, there's going to be all kinds of, shootout at the OK Corral. This is something that they said years and years ago. No. Blood doesn't run in the streets. No, there aren't gunfights every 2 minutes. The number of people who make mistakes after obtaining a concealed weapons permit are so minuscule as to be non-existent. I can think of one case, one, in the 25 years I've carried a weapon, one case where a guy went to jail after he was thrown to the ground by a guy. He grabbed his pistol and shot him to death. That was in Florida. And Florida courts held, no, you weren't under deadly force. You were just pushed to the ground. He's in jail now. And he should be. In 43 other states, Thomas noted, authorities are required to issue licenses to applicants who meet certain requirements, and officials do not have discretion to say no due to what they believe is insufficient need. 43 other states. In a concurring opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh noted the Thursday ruling does not prohibit states from setting requirements to obtain a carry license, and that it addresses only the unusual discretionary licensing regimes. It is a narrow decision. It is a proper decision. It works to the benefit of law-abiding citizens. Again, finally. The case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Bruin, was the first major gun rights case before the Supreme Court in more than a decade. In the majority opinion, Thomas referenced the 2010 McDonald versus City of Chicago and 2008's D.C. versus Heller in his reasoning for today's ruling. As we stated in Heller and repeated in McDonald, individual self-defense is the central component of the Second Amendment right. He also referenced how Heller made clear that restrictions on carrying guns in sensitive places is permissible, and how New York was wrong for arguing that its law was merely doing just that. Well, it was not. This is what happens when the left overreaches. This is what happens when the left overreaches and goes way too far. Way too far. And when they do this, when they say you have to have proper cause and there is no way to actually achieve proper cause in the mind of a government official, that's a violation of the Constitution. And it's not a violation of people who want to carry weapons. It's not just a violation of the people who want to carry weapons. It's also a violation of the people who don't like weapons at all. It's a violation of everyone's constitutional right. Every single person. Now, the sensitive places thing, that's the next battleground. What's a sensitive place? There are places that I can walk in with my weapon. There are places I cannot walk in with my weapon. I stay away from the places I can't walk in with my weapon because they're dangerous. And while I do carry a weapon, was carrying one today. While I do carry a weapon, I am the last person on the planet that wants to get into a gunfight. I am not going to go into a place where I can't defend myself. I'm just not. I'm not going to do it. So there are a lot of places I don't go because I don't want to get into a gunfight. These are the issues that we all have to keep in mind here. These are the responsibilities, the societal responsibilities of gun owners. The fact that you can be driving down the road and have somebody take a shot at you is a proven fact. That you can go to the grocery store and get shot because someone had a bad day is a proven fact. There are places in Texas, for example, we have the 51% law. If a restaurant establishment derives 51% of its earnings through a bar, for example, you can't go in there with your weapon. You just can't. There's another law. It's called the 30-06 law. It's the 3006 law that forbids entrance by people even with concealed weapons licenses. Actually, the 30-06 law says that if you don't have a license, you can't go in. So I can go into 30-06, I think. Let me double check that. I'm going to double check that during the break because I'm a little confused about it. Good. The break is just coming right now. Fantastic. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll make sure that I get that taken care of in Texas. But the 51% law I've got right. Okay? We believe respondents err in their attempt to characterize New York's proper cause requirement as a sensitive place law, said Thomas, explaining the New York viewed sensitive places as anywhere where people typically congregate and where law enforcement and other public safety professionals are presumptively available. Too many people are getting killed in America's great big cities because of that particular reasoning. Oh, no, we'll protect you. But they can't protect you. They just can't. All you have to do is just look up the statistics. They're awful. You're listening to the Wells Report. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. Thank you very much for joining us. By the way, I was correct. I made a mistake regarding 30.6. I quoted it correctly, and then I said, wait a minute, that may not be the case. And then I realized that I had made a mistake because I thought I made a mistake. The 30.6 law in Texas says that that's somebody that can post a sign saying they don't want weapons in their place. And you can't go in there, even if you have a license. No open carry. There is no concealed carry, 30.7, no open carry, because we now have constitutional carry in Texas. You can carry a weapon out in the open if you choose. And thank you very much, Ms. Yvonne, for clarifying that. I immediately did that. Yeah, for some reason, I quoted the law correctly, and then I backed off of it for reasons I can't figure out. Let's get back to this decision written by Clarence Thomas. They talked about, Thomas wrote saying that the New York law viewed sensitive places as anywhere where people typically congregate, where law enforcement and other public safety professionals are presumptively available. Justice Thomas said that that was too broad a definition. Put simply, there is no historic basis for New York to effectively declare the island of Manhattan a sensitive place simply because it's crowded and protected generally by the New York City Police Department. The conservative justice also looked at the plain language of the Second Amendment, which protects the right to keep and bear arms. He described keeping and bearing as two separate things, noting that Heller defines bear as to wear, bear, or carry. This implies public carrying, Thomas said, because someone would not generally wear the gun in a holster at home. I don't. You would keep it someplace I can get to. The 63-page opinion also explored historic restrictions on carrying handguns that New York relied on. Thomas explained why they don't justify a current restriction, noting how past regulations from centuries ago focused on dangerous and unusual weapons, while handguns today are not unusual. They're relatively commonplace. While the handgun may have been considered dangerous and unusual during colonial times, in modern times, it is the quintessential self-defense weapon. There's also something else about this decision that is also very important, and that is the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment talks a lot about how you have equal protection under the law, and that does include people who are law-abiding citizens. You know, what's amazing is that because of all of these gun laws, we have criminals carrying weapons, but law-abiding citizens can't. And that was a reclamation of that in this case. And I find that essentially important. Justice Stephen Breyer wrote an impassioned dissenting opinion. He referenced the present-day fervor over gun violence as well as recent events, joined by Justices Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor. Breyer cited statistics including 45,222 Americans killed by firearms in the U.S. in 2020, the number of mass shootings that have already taken place in 2022, and how gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children and adolescents. Well, that's because children and adolescents don't typically die of anything else. Many states have tried to address some of the dangers of gun violence just described by passing laws that limit in various ways who may purchase, carry, or use firearms. The court today severely burdens states' efforts to do so. Correct. Samuel Alito, in a concurring opinion with Thomas, by the way, took issue with Breyer's references to recent shootings. Does the dissent think that laws like New York's prevent or deter such atrocities? Will a person bent on carrying out a mass shooting be stopped if he knows it's illegal to carry a handgun outside the home? And how does the dissent account for the fact that one of the mass shootings near the top of his list took place in Buffalo? The New York law at issue in this case obviously did not stop that perpetrator. The logical disagreement with this decision is flawed. And speaking of illogical or flawed dissent on these particular decisions by the Supreme Court, like this one, we'll have that for you next. Yeah, you're listening to the Wells Report. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Give us a call. Tell us what you think about the decision by the Supreme Court today regarding the Second Amendment. Back with more in a moment on the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for watching today. I sincerely appreciate it. By the way, if you like this broadcast, and by all means, please do, if you want to, share it with your friends. Hit like on the button available to you for this live stream. And also, don't forget to ring the bell. There's a little bell there in some places where you can get a notification of when we are on the air, and we would love to have you. We'd love to have you. So the Supreme Court today ruled that a New York law that said you had to show proper cause for needing a concealed handgun license in the city of New York or in the state of New York was overly broad, and they struck the law down. There are 7 places, at least 7 places in the continental United States, that have laws that say the same thing. California being the most notable. That will change. It must. Now, Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, we were just talking about that, said in a dissenting opinion that the conservative majority severely burdens state laws aimed at curbing violence. Well, what I take issue with Justice Breyer's reasoning on that is because the 7 states that have this must show proper cause have the most gun violence anywhere in the United States. And the reason is because criminals know that the chances are very, very, very slim in the 0.0 percentiles that they're ever going to run across somebody with a weapon while they commit their gun crime. Justice Breyer writes, many states have tried to address some of the dangers of gun violence just described by passing laws that limit in various ways who may purchase, carry, or use firearms of different kinds. The court today severely burdened states' effort to do so. Justice Sotomayor and Elena Kagan joined Breyer in his dissent. Chief Justice John Roberts, Justices Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, Samuel Alito, and Clarence Thomas made up the majority. Thomas delivered the court's majority opinion, arguing the Second and 14th Amendments protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. New York law required an applicant to show proper cause for seeking a license. The majority struck that down. Because the state of New York issues public carry licenses only when an applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense, we conclude the state's licensing regime violates the Constitution. Breyer said the U.S. deals with massive amounts of gun crime and that the domain of state legislatures to address that, even if there are many lawful uses for firearms. The states do have a right to do so. The question before us concerns the extent to which the Second Amendment prevents democratically elected officials from enacting laws to address the serious problem of gun violence. And yet the court today purports to answer that question without discussing the nature or severity of that problem. And then Samuel Alito points out in the dissenting opinion that there was a shooting in Buffalo that occurred under this particular regulatory regime of New York. And of course, that's absolutely completely correct. What if someone in the grocery store had been carrying a weapon? The answer is it would have been a completely different event, assuming the person would have acted to stop it. Texas doesn't have those kinds of things, really. The only time people get shot up in Texas is when the people who are doing the shooting are pretty sure that there won't be any weapons in the place they go into, like schools, which is all of this dissent ignores the fact that schools are unsafe. They are unsafe for kids. They're unsafe for teachers. They're unsafe for pro-Second Amendment supporters, and they are unsafe for anti-Second Amendment dissenters. And that's just simply the case. Had there been adequate security in any of the schools where we've had school shootings, there wouldn't have been school shootings. But there wasn't adequate security. There simply wasn't. And by the way, that's still in effect today. There's still not adequate protection for our kids in schools. Why? Now that gets into motivation. I try to stay away from the motivations of people trying to create scenarios whereby people can get shot to death, because it looks to me like evil. It looks to me like they'd rather have an opportunity to be able to go in front of cameras and demagogue the issue of another bunch of kids getting shot in some school someplace than to make the schools safe. That's what it looks like to me. And I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for someone to do something about that. By the way, in case you're wondering, in Oklahoma, they've done that. They've done that. President Biden today said he was deeply disappointed with the Supreme Court gun decision that struck down a New York law restricting access to concealed carry permits. Biden released the statement hours after the Supreme Court released its decision. The New York law required permit applicants to provide specific reasons for needing a firearm. No one could qualify. Since 1911, the state of New York has required individuals who would like to carry a concealed weapon in public to show a need to do so for the purpose of self-defense and acquire a license. More than a century later, the United States Supreme Court has chosen to strike down New York's long-established authority to protect its citizens. Are you protected in New York? Are you protected in Chicago? Are you protected in LA? You protected in Philadelphia? Protected in Baltimore? Where are you protected? In these places where you can't, for whatever reason, find yourself with a concealed carry permit. Concealed carry permit holders are the safest people, the most law-abiding people in the nation. Again, all these places that have all these restrictive gun laws, just like New York, have the most shootings. What does that tell you? When someone walks into a school with an unauthorized firearm, most cases dressed in black and body armor, he should be shot a dozen times from 3 or 4 different directions with 2 or 3 different calibers. On the spot. We just had one of those situations here in Texas where a guy walked up to a summer camp. He got blasted to smithereens. He's gone. Just like he should be. The number of people who defend themselves successfully with firearms far outweighs, to the point of ridiculousness, those people with concealed carry permits who actually commit crime with them. And that's the problem with categorizing gun violence. Anybody using a weapon is gun violence. Let's put it this way. When you defend yourself with a firearm, that's violent. It's not gun violence that we're worried about. It's gun crime. Gun crime. Somebody does themselves in with a firearm, that's listed as gun violence. It's a violent act. There's no doubt about it. But all I can tell you is that it's very disturbing to me that the President of the United States does not agree with the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, a document that he swore in an oath of office in front of everyone that he would protect and defend. Well, obviously, he's not interested in law-abiding citizens being able to defend themselves. Okay. So what's the story? Looks to me like these people are anti-American, that they don't like this country, that they want to be able to be the Lord and giver of defense for the general public. And they can't do it. If they could do it, they would do it, ostensibly. Democrat New York Governor Kathy Hochul also condemned the ruling, calling it a dark day for New York. She stated the U.S. only had access to muskets when the Second Amendment was written, and that she was prepared to go back to muskets through gun restrictions. Well, that's going to last until somebody shows up with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. You know, the thing about the Second Amendment was that it discussed arms, not muskets. Arms, commonly used weapons, are now pistols and rifles that are automatic loading or semi-automatic weapons and pistols. Police carry them, soldiers carry them, and so on. In my way of interpreting the Second Amendment, it seems to me that the people of the United States should have access to most of the same weapons that a typical U.S. military rifleman has hold of. Do we need grenades? No. We don't need grenades. We don't. Rifle and pistol? No problem. And if indeed soldiers in the United States military are carrying weapons very much like an AR-15, except actual weapons of war that actually have an automatic, a rapid fire, not an automatic fire option, I don't believe the people of the United States need to have those. By the way, it's a frightful waste of ammunition. If you watch any professionals, that even soldiers, professional soldiers don't hardly ever use automatic fire. It's a waste of ammunition. So, Kathy Hochul talking to the left, President Biden talking to AOC, deeply disappointed that the Supreme Court of the United States actually decided to move forward with the Second Amendment. The proper cause standard allowed state officials to determine whether applicants had supplied a specific reason for needing a firearm, denying access to people who stated they simply wanted to protect themselves. You can't need a weapon for self-defense. That's not a proper cause. Working in a terrible part of town is not proper cause. In this case, petitioners and respondents agree that ordinary law-abiding citizens have a similar right to carry handguns publicly for their self-defense. We too agree and now hold, consistent with Supreme Court decisions of the past, the Second and 14th Amendment. Those amendments protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home. Because the state of New York issues public carry licenses only when an applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense, the licensing regime violates the Constitution. And Justice Thomas is again correct. So Kathy Hochul, who is the governor of New York, and President Biden, who is the president of the United States, joined by several Democrat lawmakers, expressing dismay. It's deeply disturbing and is showing an activism by these Supreme Court justices to undermine common sense, state laws, and precedent, said Kirsten Gillibrand, the Democrat of New York. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio told Fox News that the ruling was a radical decision by increasingly radicalized Supreme Court. In other words, to actually interpret the Second Amendment as intended, that's a radical statement. A radical statement? Really? What does that tell you about these people? Actually holding that the Second Amendment means something is somehow radical now. The country doesn't want kids on his 18th birthday to be able to walk into a gun store with no real background check, no waiting period, and buy a handgun or a weapon, and conceal that weapon and shoot a lot of people in a short period of time. I can't think of a time where an 18-year-old walked in, purchased a weapon, concealed it, and then shot a lot of people in a short period of time. The Uvalde shooter had it right in his hands, plainly visible. Walked right into the back door. I want to know what they're talking about here. An 18-year-old, by the way, cannot get a concealed weapons license. You got to be 21 years of age already. And that's something that I completely agree with. I want to know, so there's no way for an 18-year-old to get a concealed weapons license. Therefore, there is nothing to base that statement on. There is no data on it. Are 18-year-olds shooting the place up? Yeah. Are they concealing their weapons? No. No, they're not. They're shooting people that cannot carry a weapon because they're law-abiding citizens. The flaw in the logic is just rife. The Ohio Senator, Sherrod Brown, added the Supreme Court ruling wouldn't impact bipartisan gun legislation working its way through Congress. That is true. By the way, it cleared another hurdle today in the United States Senate. There was a vote to invoke cloture. In other words, close off debate and vote on this weapons law package. And we'll be talking about that coming up in just a couple of moments. And so all these people are talking about how this is some sort of travesty. Yet 47 states. I think that was the statistic. 43 states, sorry. 43 states already have this law. The 7 states that don't have this law have the most shootings. Methinks there's silly anti-logic afoot. How about you? This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. Thank you for being a part of this broadcast. You can do so by calling us at 817-379-2172. Phone rings right there, in case you're wondering. Right there. You can also find us on the chat. Got a very, very good group of people talking about this issue at this particular moment, which is the whole point of it. A gun safety bill, the first of its kind in 3 decades, made it through a key procedural step today, putting the measure closer to the Senate floor for a final vote. A 65-34 vote ended debate on the Safer Communities Act. Support for the proposal had been expected. A bipartisan group of 20 senators had been negotiating a deal since May, when mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde, Texas, gripped the nation. and put pressure on lawmakers to come up with a legislative solution. The vote came hours after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down gun restrictions in New York amid more fallout in Uvalde, where a Texas investigator said the police response was an abject failure, obviously. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell both support the legislation. Schumer is racing against a Senate self-imposed deadline to pass the legislation before tomorrow. They're leaving on a 2-week holiday recess. The action today keeps the Senate on track to vote on the deal before lawmakers leave on July 4th. The Senate will pass the bill, then it'll move to the House before being sent to President Joe Biden's desk. 2 sticking points, red flag laws and the boyfriend loophole, were resolved, and shortly after, the group of senators issued a joint statement to say they'd reached an agreement. A key piece of the legislation expands background checks on gun buyers 21 and younger to include their mental health and juvenile justice records. So tell your kids if they make a mistake that gets them in trouble with the law, they can kiss their Second Amendment goodbye. It also forces a waiting time of a period of 10 business days for the seller and authorities to complete the review. Senators said such a review could have stopped mass shootings last month in Buffalo, New York, Uvalde, Texas, as well as a 2015 mass shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. The legislation allocates $15 billion for mental health and school safety services, which is good. Yeah, let's make the schools safe for a change. How about that? Also, grants would be provided to every state as an incentive to adopt red flag laws, which allow courts to remove firearms from those deemed a threat to themselves or others. Are they guilty of anything? No. Have they made any bad moves in the past with their firearms? No. Red flag laws are simply there to confiscate weapons from essentially law-abiding citizens. By the way, if crazy old Joe is your father or your grandfather, and he has some weapons, do us all a favor. Handle it as a family matter. Don't involve the government or the police department. Just handle it. Okay? Just handle it. In my family, if I start losing it, my weapons have a new home. And one I approved while I hadn't lost it. Just in case you're wondering. The Senate package also closes the boyfriend loophole, a legislative gray area that leaves some women vulnerable to gun-related domestic violence, as opposed to leaving some men vulnerable to gun-related violence on the part of their female partners. Current law prevents domestic violence offenders from buying guns if they abuse their spouses or live-in partners with whom they had children. The Senate legislation expands the law to include boyfriends or partners in current or recent relationships, quote, of a romantic or intimate nature, unquote. Men, if you haven't married her, gather your things and move out of the house today. Not because she's a jerk, not because you would be in a situation at some point where she might have an argument with you and tell the police that you took a shot at her. Okay? Don't do it. Don't move in with your girlfriend until you're married. Do yourself a favor, or at least engaged, man. Come on. Because I know way too many guys that find themselves in trouble with the law, as opposed to domestic violence perpetrators, because of an argument that got out of hand. It's a well-worn legal track used by angry women against their men. I suppose angry men use it against their women, but I haven't heard many of those stories. So once again, if you're a boyfriend or a partner and you're living with a woman that you occasionally have arguments with, get your stuff and get out. You need to protect your piece of the Bill of Rights. And then they say this provision alone is going to save the lives of so many women who unfortunately die at the hands of a boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend who hunts them down with a firearm. What about the men who die? Oh, is that justified in some way? Yeah, women shooting men is okay, but men shooting women obviously isn't okay. Don't get me wrong, shooting anybody isn't okay. It just isn't, unless you have absolutely no choice. If you have absolutely no choice, that's a different matter. Like, for example, when somebody at the grocery store pulls out a weapon and starts shooting, you have no choice. You don't want to get into a gunfight. But I'm concerned about this law. I'm concerned about the fact that it pierces juvenile court records. I'm proud of the Supreme Court of the United States for standing for the 14th Amendment and the Second Amendment. Let's just hope it continues along that course. The debate rages. Take your part in it. This is the Wells Report.
It's 15 hours.
North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We bring you news, the real news, analysis for fact, commentary, and debate. Debate is where you can take issues, with some of the commentary. That's the check and balance. Just like the Constitution, you have access. Two ways, in fact, you can take care of your dissenting opinion to anything that I say, because your opinion is just as valuable as mine, whether it agrees or disagrees. That's not the point. The point is that we have the discussion. You can take part in the chat. I look at that as much as I possibly can, and I also will take phone calls at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let's get together and chat about these things. It's important. So I want to know just exactly how many former Obama administration officials have been arrested, or at least have their homes searched and their electronic devices confiscated. I want to know how many Obama-era officials had the FBI in their homes, confiscating their electronic devices and or placing them under arrest. Do you have any idea how many there were? I can't find a single one. Can't find a single one. Can't find a single one at all. Can you? By all means, give me a call. 817-379-1754. Because I can't think of a single one. Was there dramatic miscreancy? Especially on the part of the FBI. Not technically Obama-era officials, but let's include them too. There were a lot of people fired by the FBI for violating the professional standards of that organization based on the miscreancy that they showed during the Obama administration. I know people that have been subpoenaed by the Congressional Committee, for example, investigating January 6th and other places, that refused to do so. They were promptly arrested. They were put in shackles in public. One time it happened to a Trump-era official, and CNN was tipped off so they could be there to dutifully record the FBI doing their important work to run these denizens to Earth. How much of that happened during the Obama administration? None. I know people that lied to Congress or lied to the FBI, and they found themselves in jail immediately, forthwith. Michael Flynn, others. That happened during the Obama administration? No. No, not at all. So why is it happening to Trump-era officials? It happened again today. Federal authorities searched the home of Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official with the Trump administration. An official with the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. confirmed to Fox News there was a law enforcement activity in the vicinity of Jeffrey Clark's home. Yeah, it was Jeffrey Clark's home in Lorton, Virginia. It happened yesterday. Clark's name is expected to come up in hearings with the House Select Committee investigating January 6th. You know what this looks like? The McCarthy hearing. This makes the McCarthy hearings look like absolutely nothing. Universally reviled by the American left, even though it's come out now that many of the things that Senator Joseph McCarthy was actually trying to expose actually did occur. Espionage, truly anti-American activities. But that just gets swept under the rug. You have nothing to see here. Just move on. The U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. had no comment regarding the nature of the activity or any of the particular individuals. Clark served as an acting assistant attorney general for the civil division during Trump's final months in office. Colleagues have testified he was a true believer the 2020 election had been stolen. So, in other words, his house was ransacked by the DOJ because he disagreed with the orthodoxy surrounding the 2020 election. Clark repeatedly flouted DOJ policy, like James Comey. Oh, by the way, did I mention that Eric Holder also refused to comply with a congressional subpoena regarding Fast and Furious, gun running into Mexico, perpetrated in the United States by the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder at the time? Did I mention that? I should have. Did he go to jail? Was he arrested? Was he put in shackles? Nope. John Brennan. John Brennan lied to Congress a bunch of times. Was he held in contempt of Congress? No. I mean, I can't think of any of that. I just can't. It's even more evident in hindsight, but at the time I did think he's meeting with the president. Now he wants to be briefed by the director of national intelligence on thermostats. What's going on here with Jeff Clark, former Trump appointing acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, told the Senate Judiciary Committee last year. So in other words, Democrat-controlled houses of legislation can now evoke the FBI into doing essentially enforcement work for the Democrats in the government? Does this sound like the United States to you? I don't think so. The committee subpoenaed Clark in October. He refused to answer questions during testimony, so they just decided to go into his house and find all that stuff. Is that government oppression? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Are we actually arresting Trump officials for crime or for differences of opinion? Is it okay in the United States to doubt the 2020 election? You know what? The First Amendment says, yeah, it's okay to doubt that. President Trump is being made to look like an anti-American thug in the January 6th hearings. And they say that because he actually didn't believe what he was saying. How do they know? How do they know? Okay, so someone who is of the dissent class in the Wells report says, who committed misdeeds during Obama's tenure? Jeffrey Clark's home was raided because Trump was willing to place him as AG. Clark promised to use DOJ powers to support Trump's false claims. Let's see. Jeffrey Clark's home was raided because Trump was willing to place him as AG. Was he actually placed as AG? No. Clark promised to use the DOJ powers to support Trump's false claims. How do you know they're false? I don't know that they're false. How do you know they're false? Because the mainstream media tells you they're false over and over and over again at every possible turn? Is that how you know they're false? You keep saying a court of law has decided that the 2020 election is absolutely, completely clear of any misdeeds, even though there's been no investigation. Well, there's been no investigation of what you're saying here with all these people involved. There's been no investigation of them either, and yet they're being arrested. Why? You see, you get arrested in America by oath or affirmation and probable cause. Has Merrick Garland used the DOJ to do the Democrat Party's business? Yes. What's the difference between Merrick Garland and Jeffrey Clark? Jeffrey Clark actually didn't do any of those things. He said he was going to, but he didn't actually do it, according to you. And yet here we are. Merrick Garland has actually done it. Is he in trouble with the law? No. Should he be in trouble with the law? We'll see. And by the way, I'm going to be extraordinarily critical of Republican ideas to do the same thing that has been done to Trump-era officials if they try it. Let me give you another example. We know of people on the left that have actually committed crimes. Open and shut cases, not prosecuted. Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden, they've committed crimes. No prosecution. Why? Well, because in order to get prosecuted by the DOJ, in order to get prosecuted by the FBI, you have to be a Republican. That's why. That violates the 14th Amendment. You know, that equal protection thing. It's ridiculous. So getting back to the January 6th thing, this same person says the DOJ, Rosen, Ivanka, Jared, Miller, Barr, and others have testified under oath that there was no mass voter fraud. That's not actually what they testified to, but we'll just go with it. Cite Garland's abuse of the DOJ. Okay. Ransacking Jeffrey Clark's home. How about that? Ransacking Jeffrey Clark's home. Having access to Hunter Biden's laptop and refusing to do anything with it. By the way, it absolutely annoys me that Republicans also have access to that and are waiting until the 2024 election before they start spilling it out on the floor. They should have done it already. Because I happen to think that withholding evidence for political reasons is wrong, whether you're Republican or Democrat. So somebody else says, you know, this looks an awful lot like the Stasi. You know, I think so. I think so. What crime did Hillary commit? Hillary had a private server in her home right down the hall from a secured, compartmented information, a SCIF. It was wide open. It was being read by Chinese intelligence. She violated 16 provisions of the Espionage Act. None of them required intent. And yet, the director of the FBI, a division of the DOJ, stood in front of the entire country and said that her intent was not to violate that law. Even when the law says intent is not necessary to violate the law. There you go. Any other questions? So in other words, for the DOJ or the FBI or the CIA or anybody else, I mean, there's just plain the FBI just absolutely gave false testimony in front of the FISA court. But it's okay because it's only Republicans being affected. Right? I don't think so. How about you? This is the Wells Report. Let me know. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. We bring you the news. We bring you analysis for fact of the news. We bring you commentary, and we bring you debate. And here we are. We're talking about government oppression. There was another act of government oppression today. U.S. Food and Drug Administration announced a nationwide ban on the sale and marketing of Juul Labs Incorporated vaping and e-cigarette products. Why? The federal agency has cited insufficient and conflicting data in Juul's application to continue selling non-fruit flavored products. Insufficient and conflicting data. The company must cease marketing and sales of Juul's vaping devices in 4 types of liquid pods: Virginia tobacco flavored and menthol flavored pods with nicotine levels of 5 and 3% respectively. The agency said retailers should contact Juul with questions about the products they have on shelves or in their inventory. The sales and marketing ban does not restrict consumer possession or use of the popular devices. The agency does not enforce consumer use of vaping or other tobacco products. The FDA reviewed marketing applications from Juul and hundreds of other companies amid calls from anti-tobacco groups to crack down on products that led to a surge in youth vaping in the past decade. But advocates of these nicotine-delivering devices say they can help adult smokers kick the habit of smoking cigarettes or using other tobacco products. What do you suppose this is all about? What do you suppose this is all about? The U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Are vapes dangerous? We don't know. We haven't done any research on it. I doubt very sincerely that they're dangerous. The reason I doubt that they're dangerous is because if you take a shower, you inhale steam. Now, sometimes I remember getting a bad sinus infection from a steam room at a gym once. Bad. I couldn't believe it, in fact. I'd never had sinusitis before. I thought I was dying. I really did. I thought I had pneumonia. It was terrible. It was terrible. Okay. And so the circumstance goes like this. All I can say is that vapes are not as dangerous as cigarettes. That's just my idea of it. They can't be. It's impossible. It's not nicotine that gives you cancer. It's the rest of the combusting products of a cigarette that gives you cancer. Nicotine is very much like caffeine in that it hops up your brain. It's true. And I still note that even though there is not conflicting data or insufficient data on the dangers of cigarettes, that they are still available in the marketplace. Why is that? And oh, by the way, tobacco companies used to market directly to children in the form of candy cigarettes. I thought they were cool when I was a kid. So why is Juul out of business thanks to the FDA? Because vaping products are not taxed identically to tobacco products. $2 or $3 of taxes are collected with every pack of cigarettes that are sold in the United States, and that money is not available to the government of the United States because people are buying fewer and fewer cigarettes and more vapes. They don't have any data that say that vapes are anywhere close to as dangerous as cigarettes. They have plenty of data that cigarettes are dangerous. There is a warning label on every pack of cigarettes sold in the United States. Been there since the 60s. I mean, dangerous, costing people's lives. And yet you can buy a pack of cigarettes. I don't get it. Actually, I do get it, and I'm pretty sure that you get it too. More government oppression? Got to do something about this. This is the Wells Report. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can call anytime you want to. When you see those terribly fancy animations we use during the breaks, you can call me on the telephone, and I will gladly speak to you at any time. Also, there are people that have the secret phone number that rings this telephone. They can use that too. Matter of fact, I will interact with them as well. Alrighty. So you are listening to the Wells Report, and you can reach out to us via the phone number, or you can do a chat if you'd like to. And thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. So, Disney earlier this year decided that they were going to go full LGBTQ, and consequently are having problems both at their amusement parks and with their movies. The most recent example of this is the Buzz Lightyear movie. The Buzz Lightyear movie is not doing well at the box office. And the reason that the Buzz Lightyear movie is not doing well at the box office is because, well, there is a problem or two or three or 10 with the kind of content that's in that movie. Disney films used a device where the main character of their films lost their mothers in the opening few scenes of the film. It became a joke, actually. Although it's not funny to lose your mom. I've lost my mom. It happened nearly 15 years ago, and it's still not funny. But there is a lesbian kiss in Buzz Lightyear. And strangely enough, Buzz Lightyear, being a source of children's entertainment, parents just aren't real sure. Most parents are just not real sure they want their kids to be exposed to that level of amorous activity at a Disney film. You know, strangely, Juul cigarettes, we were just talking about that. Juul cigarettes were told to stop selling and stop marketing their product immediately by the FDA. Okay? Because those rotten people were marketing to children. Well, what about the marketing to children of LGBTQ material in Disney films? Is that wrong too? Could be. So, the New York Times and the Washington Post printed columns warning of GOP backlash against LGBTQ rights, fearing a reversal of gay marriage. Oh! Let me give you the Fox News version of this story. Both the New York Times and Washington Post published opinion columns yesterday warning about the conservative movement's ugly uprising against LGBTQ rights. The Washington Post's Alyssa Rosenberg feared that conservatives were looking to erase the more tolerant future for LGBTQ people in America, while the New York Times' Charles M. Blow claimed the right was forcing LGBTQ folks into cultural gay ghettos. Really? We're not forcing anybody anywhere in this country. We don't do that. I don't know who he's talking about, but let's just move on. Blow even worried that the conservative majority of the Supreme Court could undo Roe v. Wade, that what would stop, if the conservative majority of the Supreme Court would undo Roe v. Wade, what would stop the High Court from undoing gay marriage? Ah! Well, the fact that it really doesn't have anything to do with gay marriage. Doesn't have anything to do with it. As far as I know, there are no federal cases going through the federal docket at this particular moment at any level that has any argument whatsoever with gay marriage. You know what the problem with gay marriage is? The problem with gay marriage is that essentially that the courts of the United States imposed it on churches. So did the fascist, anti-American left who did the same thing. Some churches complied, some churches didn't. The effect is that churches split roughly 50-50, with half of the church members forming their own versions of their church, while the Orthodox portions of those churches slowly are withering away. You see, that's the problem. It's one thing to stand for your rights. It's another thing to impose them. Just the way it is. So now what we're having here is we're having this idea that Roe v. Wade, which was a flawed decision by the Supreme Court of the United States in the first place, is being corrected by this version of the Supreme Court. Now they're saying, my God, everything that they fought for forever is going to be thrown into the trash can. No, it won't. No, it won't. Both of these columns expressed alarm the conservative movement's recent efforts to challenge aspects of the LGBTQ agenda, mentioning the backlash against a new Disney Pixar movie, Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, and the conservative opposition to drag queen story hour events for children. You know, drag queens just aren't children's entertainment. They just aren't. I'm sorry. Children don't need to see drag queens. And the reason the LGBTQ agenda, as expressed here, is having difficulty is because they keep imposing themselves on the people of the United States. It's like teenage obnoxious behavior. Except they're not teenagers. It's simply impolite. It's obnoxious. You're imposing yourself on other people that really aren't interested. And then, of course, what you do is you say that they are somehow discriminatory because they're not interested in your particular life. That's also obnoxious. It's impolite. Live your life. Have fun. If you're going to have drag queen story hour, have it with adults that actually get the humor. Why not? I mean, that's what burlesque is all about, right? I mean, burlesque is fun. I mean, you know, it's fun. I mean, I guarantee you that the LGBTQ agenda was far better served by The Birdcage, the Robin Williams movie, the Nathan Lane movie, Robin Williams. Far better served by that movie than Drag Queen Story Hour. But guess what? You wouldn't take your kid to go see The Birdcage either. Birdcage was a delightful film. It absolutely was magnificent. Funny as hell. It really was. But Drag Queen Story Hour has a very plain, very straightforward, very easily discerned purpose, and that is to groom young kids. Just like Disney films that have material in them that is inappropriate. It really doesn't make any difference whatsoever what kind of sexual overtones are in a Disney film. They're pretty much all inappropriate. Pretty much all inappropriate. Well, now, wait a minute. What about Snow White? Prince Charming came and kissed her while she was asleep. Well, that's molestation. Yeah, it's also an ancient fairy tale that has been told through not hundreds of generations. Well, maybe hundreds of generations. I'm going to find out. I have this capability here. Let's see. Snow White. Snow White. Let's see. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was 1937. So let's see. That's 4 generations. Snow White. It's a 19th century German fairy tale. The Grimm brothers, the Brothers Grimm, published it in 1812. 1812. I guess that was back when you could give a sleeping girl a kiss without having your entire life canceled. Savages. So once again, these two columns are now hitting the panic button over all of these things. Alyssa Rosenberg and Charles Blow. Rosenberg opened her concerns with the conservative backlash against Disney Pixar's Lightyear movie, which features a kiss between a lesbian couple. She called the movie and its reception a useful barometer of the current conservative backlash against LGBTQ rights. No, it's a backlash against obnoxious imposition of LGBTQ's agenda. Am I getting this right? Am I getting this right? I think I'm getting this right. I could be wrong, but I just don't think so. I just don't think so. I mean, you're not going to take your kids to go see that. You're just not. I mean, kids are confused enough. Kids are confused enough. Have you noticed that everybody in junior high school is obnoxious? The teachers, the kids, everybody's miserable. You know why? Because kids are miserable when they're between the ages of, I don't know, 11 and what, 35? Okay, that's probably an overstatement. Yeah. So no, it's like kids between the ages of like 11 and 16 are pretty dang miserable. And there are all kinds of conflicting things and so on and so forth. And into this idea of conflicting things, we are now going to introduce different versions of sexuality, different versions of gender. We're going to take puberty and make it even worse. Seriously? And what are we doing this for? What are we doing this for? Well, we're grooming our kids. That's what we're doing this for. We're grooming our kids. Well, there's discrimination against the LGBTQ. Well, okay, there is discrimination, or there is discrimination used as a political lever to continue the grooming process of the kids. I mean, so was Ghislaine Maxwell wrongly convicted of grooming children? Because it seems like the LGBTQ community thinks that it's perfectly okay. In fact, it's their right to groom children. What am I getting wrong? What am I getting wrong? Here's the telephone number, 817-379-2172. Tell me where I'm getting it wrong. I will answer the question and we will talk right this minute. We can do it. What I'm thinking is that not many people are disagreeing with me. I'm a parent. I got to be perfectly honest with you. I honestly believe that people grooming kids for sexual reasons is a crime. I absolutely think so. Ghislaine Maxwell thinks so. Well, actually, she didn't think so, but everybody who sat in judgment of Ghislaine Maxwell thought so. So just exactly what are we doing here? Rosenberg then immediately starts getting imperiously fascist by saying, quote, if people are truly angered by the lesbian relationship depicted in Lightyear, then maybe what seems like a huge leap into a more tolerant future was just a moment of calm in an ongoing and intensifying culture war. Right. Yeah, it's like when the LGBT community stops imposing themselves on everyone else, things calm down. When the LGBT community and their agenda is imposed on people that are not interested, not willing to be interested, or anything at all, moreover, don't want their kids groomed for the future, well, suddenly now there's a backlash. There is a culture war in these United States. There is a culture war. There are traditional values and there are non-traditional values. And because the avant-garde idea of non-traditional values is something that does indeed find protection in the Bill of Rights, I can find no reason whatsoever why they should enjoy the same rights that we do, that everybody else does. However, that's not what's happening. What's happening is a fascist stomping of anybody that doesn't go along. That's why people aren't going to watch Buzz Lightyear. It has nothing to do with a conservative backlash. It has to do with an obnoxious backlash. In recent months, broader anti-LGBTQ animus has reemerged in the national scene with real force and venom. Huh? Yeah, there was an alleged white supremacist plot at an LGBTQ pride event. You're kidding. Is that anything like the Antifa plots against conservative events? Oh, you keep doing that whataboutism. No, I keep pointing out hypocrisy. That's different than whataboutism. Just my 2 cents. Listening to the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Strangely, nobody has called in response to my query as to just exactly what I'm getting wrong about these two columns, one in the Washington Post and one in the New York Times, pointing out the realities of alternate life when our children are exposed. And this idea that because the Supreme Court of the United States is fixing an egregious mistake made in 1973 that, by the way, may have killed 50 million African Americans in these United States. Yeah, it's genocide. But let's move on. Let's just move on. Because of that, they're worried that this new conservative majority, my God, will unravel the LGBTQ agenda. No, what's going to unravel the LGBTQ agenda, you know what it is? It's like people are going to stop caring about it one way or another because it's really none of our business. The only time that anybody has an argument that the LGBTQ agenda is being harmed is because the LGBTQ agenda, you can't escape it. You can't get away from it. It's in your face all the time. And what's even worse, it's in our kids' face all the time. I don't want my kids groomed like that. Drag queen story hour. Really? Why would you need to? By the way, what stories are they telling? Nobody talks about that. Chuck Blow's New York Times piece opened with, quote, drag queens are predators, trans women are a threat, and gay marriage is a violation of the natural order. You know, Chuck, I have to be perfectly honest with you. Until you brought it up, gay marriage was so far beneath my radar, I really had nothing to say. I have one hassle with gay marriage. One. You want to know what it is? My nephew, Robbie, is gay. He and his significant other, Juan, which I can now call his husband, decided to get married. They eloped. That's my annoyance. That's my annoyance with gay marriage. The only gay marriage that I have had the opportunity to take part in did not happen because my nephew did invite me because he eloped with Juan. He and Juan have been together. They love each other. They adore each other. They are fantastic with each other. They're good. And I don't have any problem with it whatsoever, but nobody let me know the wedding was happening, or I'd have been there. I would have been there. That's my only problem with it. Now, this, on the other hand, not Curtis Blow, but he's a jazz musician, but I'm talking about Chuck Blow's thing on this is he's saying things, he's ascribing things to conservatives that have nothing to do with reality. Absolutely nothing. Trans women are a threat only to female athletes whose records are being thrown into the trash can by biological males, essentially adopting a female life. Now, trans women may be a threat to those people because, you know, they're kids, they're females that are missing out on college. They're missing out on college scholarships, especially for athletics, which Title IX, by the way, it's the 50th year of Title IX. But now what they're doing is they're giving trans women those scholarships because they do better in athletic endeavors. Yeah, so that's the only threat with the trans women present. And gay marriage, we've already discussed. Blow says that for right wingers, speaking for us now, gay marriage is too big a development to simply accept. Well, it's too late. It's been accepted. Citing conservative animosity toward the transgender movement, including the GOP's various recent bathroom bills up to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, Blow wrote, make no mistake, this is all part of a renewed, broad-based attack on gay rights and gay culture to staunch the rise of young people who are coming out. I was a fine arts major in high school. There were gay people all over. We all knew who they were. We didn't care. That was 1975, 76, 74, 75, 76. We didn't care then. We don't care now. People don't care. It's not because they don't care about LGBTQ people. They do. Anybody that gets beaten up on the street because of, say, for example, their sexuality, that's called a crime. Everybody's against that. Discrimination is a crime against humanity. We're against that too. No, what's going to undo the LGBTQ agenda is when it becomes boring, which it's well on the way to being. And when I say boring, I'm actually saying part of life. It's part of life. Most of us don't care because, A, it's none of our business, and most of us just want people to be happy. I don't care who you snuggle up with at night. I don't. I don't care what kind of entertainment you find attractive. I don't care. As long as it doesn't violate any laws, go forth and do and have fun. But all of this evangelizing for another group of downtrodden people in the United States is getting tiresome to me. I'm really getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of it because it's unnecessary. It's race baiting. It's gender baiting. It's unnecessary. How about we stop? Why don't we just stop? I mean, the people exploiting it, I mean. This is the Wells Report. Thank you very much for being here with us today. That's the second hour. We've got another hour yet to go. So by all means, stick with us. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. I'm John David Wells. Why is this broadcast different than any other talk show that you ever heard in your life? Is because I don't impose myself on you because it's obnoxious. Do I speak? Sure. But I report the news. I analyze the news for fact. I make commentary on the difference between the facts and the news. And that commentary is up for debate. That's the last part of the show. News, analysis, commentary, debate. It's a really good formula. It's so good it might even be a 5-mula. See what I did there? So the Wells Report is a news broadcast. It is not one of those things where I go, hey, this is what you should think. In fact, not at all. What I would rather do on this broadcast is to discuss the important issues of the day from a constitutional perspective. The abuses of the Constitution, the use of the Constitution's freedoms as leverage for fascism. Yvonne Field just said, 5-mula? Really? Well, yeah, really. So what I try to do with news is I work really, really hard to make sure that both sides of the news, as best I can, are represented. I go to biased news sources like CNN, although that's been tamped down by their new boss who said, we really ought to be covering the news, not the agenda. Yeah. I go to Fox. Fox kind of has teetered into the agenda, but I'm hoping that at someday news returns. We lost the New York Times. Used to be the paper of record. Now it's the paper of agenda. Washington Post, gone. They say democracy dies in the dark. What they should change their motto to is democracy dies in the light. Because as soon as democracy, which is not democracy, gets challenged in any way, shape, or form, the Washington Post feels like anybody who's challenging it needs to be stomped immediately, and by golly, they do it. That's not what we should be doing here. That's why you are welcome to join me at 817-379-2172. I am disturbed that more people don't use that telephone number. I really don't understand why that's the case. I'm asking good questions. I truly am. And I really would like people to actually answer them. And you can do that anytime. I realize that most people watch this show after I do it. I do this every day between 2 and 5 p.m. Central Time. There are 3 podcasts every day. This is the third one. Okay. Kathleen uses that number. When? Because I'm sitting here looking at the phone and it's not ringing. Am I saying the number too fast? People said that I was saying the number too fast. 817-379-2172. Or you can jump in on the chat. We've had a good chat. Yeah, and by the way, Flem points out that it's crawling across the bottom, which has nothing to do with the transgender stuff we talked about a second ago. That was in the second hour. You can go look at that too. Yesterday, Kathleen wanted to extend my car warranty and buy my home. That's true. That's who you're talking about. Yeah, they're the only people who use that phone. By the way, Gary, how come you haven't called me? For that matter, how come Isaac hasn't called me? Isaac probably doesn't call me because he's tired of losing arguments, but that's okay. So I have this need to provide both sides to my reporting. People have said, John David, you are not reporting on the January 6th committee. And that's true. Why? Why am I not reporting on it? Well, because it's only one-sided. It's one-sided. There's no give and take. It is imposition. It is imposition of a leftist agenda to destroy Donald Trump without any kind of exculpatory evidence being presented at all. And there is exculpatory evidence. 15,000 people went through the barriers into the Capitol building. 800 people were arrested. That's right around 5% of the people that were there. How come we don't ever hear about the 95% of the people there that were essentially taking part in a peaceful protest? Why don't we hear about them? Well, because Donald Trump represents the end of politics in the United States as we know them, which, by the way, is long overdue because politics poisons everything it touches. Give me one thing that politics hasn't poisoned. One will do. Politics is poisoning Disney films. Really? Really? The left agenda is just simply not that important. People reject the left agenda because of two reasons. One, it's unconstitutional, anti-American, and unconstitutional. Two, it is far disconnected from reality. And when you add the fascism of the mainstream media to stomp anybody who disagrees with the leftist orthodoxy, then you have people wandering away from that agenda as if it was poisonous because it's poisonous. It's poisonous. The left has done one thing really, really well. Set one part of America against another part of America. And when that wears out, they find another aggrieved group of people that they can then blame the majority for. And on and on and on. Sure, there's all kinds of exculpatory information on that. For example, Harvard University, by golly, man, they are on the forefront of making it possible for Black Americans to be able to get a great education. What about Asian Americans? Oh, oops. Oh. Well, there are too many Asians. Why are there too many Asians? Well, because Asian families believe that education is power. And they motivate their children to excel as a matter of culture. And so they get really high grades and they get scholarships. Well, there are too many of those. Oh, will you stop it? How about this? Why don't you take the best kids? Why don't you actually take the best and brightest? Right? Why don't you take the best and brightest? Now, the best and brightest don't have to be rich. And that's where all these scholarship programs are absolutely essential. And they are wonderful and they are fantastic, but they are not clubs, cudgels, if you will, to beat the living hell out of the people of the United States. Stop doing it. Right now. If the left did their work in a pro-American sense, there wouldn't be any trouble. There wouldn't be these culture wars that we have to deal with. There wouldn't be them. They wouldn't exist. Because our culture actually invites dissent. Right up to the point where fascism gets involved. And that's where we are. So, we have the January 6th committee. A perfect example of everything that I'm talking about right now. It is a fascist abusive government. And it is badly running out of steam because it's going on and on and on. It is a pure political exercise with one objective, and that is to destroy Donald Trump so he doesn't run for president in 2024. That tells you what a threat. The idea that people of the United States would elect somebody besides a lifelong politician to be the president, what that actually means. Politicians have run this country into the weeds. We got another one running them into the weeds, and they got help. Joe Biden got help. There were Republicans that voted for $1.9 trillion worth of pay people so they could sit at home so they don't get a cold. Is that what that was? John David, that's ridiculous. No, it's not ridiculous. I actually had COVID. I actually had COVID after I had 3 anti-COVID shots. Yeah, people are saying, no, I'm not going to give my kids the COVID-19 shot because, first of all, kids really don't have any problem with COVID-19. They shake it off pretty easily. The vast majority of them. And so people are like, why aren't parents getting their kids vaccinated for COVID-19? Because they don't have to. Because they're waiting for all of these vaccines, these mRNA shots to actually be proved that they are safe and effective. They don't have to prove that they're safe and effective, at least not in the traditional way. They've had time to do it now. Why aren't they doing it? Well, because they're making money hand over fist. Pharmaceutical firms are making money hand over fist. Here's a good question. This from Isaac, who doesn't call me on the phone. JD, how can you make an opinion without watching the actual hearings? Today, former attorneys general are testifying how Trump attempted to place a yes man in charge of the DOJ to support his lies. Well, because I don't really prosecute people on attempts unless it's attempted murder or something along that line, or unless there's a criminal charge. There's no criminal charge for attempting to appoint an attorney general who agrees with you. Okay? And other attorneys general who believe that trying to put an attorney general in place that agrees with the person trying to put the attorney general in place. And by the way, did Joe Biden pick somebody who agreed with him to be the attorney general? Let me think. Yeah. Is Merrick Garland a straight up down the center law enforcement officer? Yes or no? The answer is no. The answer is no. We talked about that in, I think that was the second hour of the Wells Report today. The only way that you can get prosecuted by the DOJ is if you are a Republican. There was all kinds of miscreancy during the Obama administration. Nobody got any trouble. I mean, we have gotten people who have been arrested because they did not show up because they were subpoenaed by the committee. Okay? What about Eric Holder? Well, that's whataboutism. Well, there's another way to describe whataboutism. It's called hypocrisy. And when it comes to federal law and the enforcement of federal law, hypocrisy is a bad thing. You know what it does? It invalidates federal law. This is a problem. It's a problem. I mean, it's a problem now, but think about it in the future when the tit for tat begins to start. See, this is one of those things where some groups of people say that they can abuse federal law, and then if somebody else abuses federal law, they're still abusing federal law. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells, and my microphone level is a little bit too high. See, when I type on my keyboard, I bump my microphone controller. That will change. Just give me time. Still building the studio. Yeah. Yeah, spent $2,700 yesterday on equipment for the studio. Which is why I say, for God's sakes, tell people about this show. If you find any value in this show, by all means, please do pass it along, because I kind of sort of need to make a living with this, and I'm certainly hoping that one day I'm able to. Okay? All right, so my coverage of the January 6th committee is based on the fact that it is one-sided, and it's an abuse of government. Very much like the abuse of government that occurred during the Trump administration by the FBI, the DOJ, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, the NSA, and any number of other bureaucratic officials who did their absolute dead level best to bring down the Trump administration with the able assistance of the Democrat House of Representatives, which they failed at twice. And now they're trying to do it again. And I got to be perfectly honest with you, this is criminal. Not what Donald Trump did. It's not criminal. I mean, the January 6th demonstration was a peaceful protest. Except, of course, it wasn't peaceful in the classic sense, in that nobody was killed on the street, or there was no looting and there was no burning of federal buildings. See, that would have made it a genuine peaceful protest. Because we know that peaceful protests in the United States involve all of those things, unprosecuted, of course. And so that's, as a matter of fact, as a peaceful protest, it kind of failed because it didn't have all the other things that a peaceful protest needs. There was no lazing of police officials. There was no setting fire to federal buildings, even though they could have. They could have set fire to the Capitol, but they didn't. Yeah. Yep. Why call when you refuse to use facts, logic, and information? I do use facts, logic, and information. I'm not led around. This was somebody who just chatted. I'm not led around by the nose by a demonstratedly biased anti-American media. I actually think. I actually do use facts, logic, and information. I keep bringing up questions like, okay, so there are people that say that the January 6th peaceful demonstration was an insurrection. Okay, what were the BLM riots? They were peaceful protests. They were after social justice. In other words, you can murder and you can steal and you can destroy as long as you have a good reason. Well, what if the people in January 6th had a good reason? Well, wait a minute. The good reason of the BLM riots, the good reasons were not as good as the good reasons for the January 6th insurrection, which wasn't an insurrection. It was a peaceful protest. In other words, you keep bringing up all this stuff, and you keep saying that I started my broadcast due to 9/11, and you say the attack on America, you say that January 6th was a second attack on American democracy. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form anything of the kind. It was a peaceful protest of something that appeared to be, to the people involved, as a hijacking of the 2020 election. They were simply seeking social justice. You see, I am using the same words that have been thrown about over all of these things right back at you, because that's the nature of hypocrisy. You can only deal with facts and logic when it comes to hypocrisy. And that's what I'm doing. This is the Wells Report. Maybe I should turn my microphone on. Hi, you are listening to the Wells Report. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Okay. So amazing. It's so amazing. Sometimes people just talk past each other. Just the way it is. And that's what's happening, Isaac. Too bad. You're so much smarter than that. Anyway, let's move on. The reason I brought up the January 6th committee is because aside from being one-sided with absolutely no allusion to anything else. I mean, there's been reams of video that have been shown. There have been testimonies. There have been all this kind of stuff that were all pre-approved by the committee before they were actually presented. All of that videotape edits out anything at all that would show Donald Trump in any kind of a good light. It's biased. It is a railroading. It is a lynch mob. And I'm just not in the habit of reporting the actions of a lynch mob. Okay? Isaac, you're trolling. Okay? By the way, excuse me for just a moment. I got a guy in the chat room. You're trolling. Okay? Last warning, man. You're trolling. So stop. All right? We're talking about a basic issue that you refuse to acknowledge. You made your points. Move on, or I'll move you on. Okay? Sorry. That's just the way things work. Goodbye. Goodbye. God bless you and your endeavors. Leave us in peace. Okay? If you have an honest, realistic willingness to interact on this broadcast and actually listen to what I'm saying because I listen to what you're saying, then you are welcome to dissent at any level, right up to the point where you become an obnoxious distraction. Okay? All of the material being presented by the January 6th committee is one-sided. There is no dissenting voice. There is no cross-examination. It is simply a lynch mob. But let me bring you the stories that I actually have about the January 6th committee. There was a documentary film crew that was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee. This documentary film crew interviewed Mike Pence on January 12, 2021, a day before the House of Representatives voted to impeach then-President Donald Trump for inciting the Capitol riot. In a clip of the documentary from filmmaker Alex Holder, by the way, this is from CNN, Pence has shown an email by a member of his staff that includes the draft House resolution demanding that Pence invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from power. This according to the documentary. Well, except that I don't understand the use of demanding, because I haven't seen that email. And the idea that the president can't say, hey, will you look at the 25th Amendment and so on and so on? Well, that's just fascism. Okay, this is a fascist warp of fact for the sake of a political endeavor. That's not the same. If this is so all-fired important, let's put it into court. Let's actually have an adversarial exchange of fact. And you know what happens when that happens? All of this disappears, which is why it's not happening. That's the logic part. So what's happening here is, once again, edited material being presented by the committee of a documentary. And it talks about Michael Pence getting an email that was shown to him by his aide. Okay? His aide says, hey, we got an email from President Trump. Pence says, yeah, excellent. He's then handed the phone with the email. Then he offers what is referred to as a pained smirk and asks the aide to, quote, tell Zach to print me off a hard copy for the trip home, unquote. And then he goes on with the interview. But somehow this has turned into Michael Pence, a pained smirk. Oh, my God. Well, if he had a problem with it, then he would have said something. But he didn't have a problem with it. He said, okay, it's just another fact in the machine. But this is being turned into something else. Why? Because this is a lurid attempt to twist fact to a political enterprise, which is the problem with the January 6th committee in the first place. It was the same problem with the ineffective impeachment of the president the first time and the ineffective impeachment of the president the second time, because there was no high crime or misdemeanor. Donald Trump's communication with the people that took part in the Capitol riot was, let's go over there and let them hear our voices peacefully. End of story. End of story. Donald Trump didn't egg anybody on. He didn't say, you go up there and tear the place up and by golly, I'll pay your bail. He didn't even say, go up there and do what and demonstrate and I'll pay your bail. No, that was President Biden and Kamala Harris. See, there's an awful lot of confusion here. The only difference is that Trump is a Republican and Biden and Harris and everybody else involved is a Democrat, including the two supposed Republicans on the committee, who, by the way, are going down in flames with the committee itself. So Pence is heard that the president has sent him an email. He goes, yeah, excellent. Gets the email. He has some look on his face. He goes, yeah, or whatever. And then says, tell Zach to print me off a hard copy for the trip home. That's all he's ever said. You note that Mike Pence has not actually testified. He hasn't testified. He's not going to testify. There's no need for him to testify. He's not going to serve the needs of the committee if he does. The needs of the committee is to railroad President Trump out of the 2024 election. Well, what if what happens in the 2016 election happens again in 2024? What if Donald Trump is elected by a majority of the people of the United States? What then? Then all of this is a waste of time. All of this is just another way to divide America. All this is just a migraine headache that has absolutely nothing to do with $6 a gallon gas or an 8.6% loss of income for every American in these United States, or the ham-fisted garbage that's coming out of the Biden administration because leftists rule that administration. The people of the United States have spoken, okay, in unreliable polling, that the president is blowing it. When you have 75% of the people of the United States, three quarters of us saying that the country's on the wrong track, what does it tell you? It tells you got to take all that stuff. It says you got to take all that stuff with a grain of salt about the size of the moon. That's what it says, but it's out there. This president's been ineffective. Everything he's touched has turned into expense. And now we have this January 6th committee. Okay? So after that, the next clip shows Pence saying, I'm always hopeful about America, which is completely out of context. The footage of Pence's interview, which had not been previously released, was captured less than a week after pro-Trump rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol in an effort to stop the certification of Joe Biden's election win. Pence had to be evacuated to safety amid calls for rioters to hang Mike Pence. The same evening Pence was interviewed, the House passed a resolution calling for Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from power and deem him unfit for office. Only one Republican, Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, voted in favor of the resolution, which was effectively a symbolic vote taken one day before the House impeached Trump for the second time on January 13th. Shall we say unsuccessfully impeached Trump? Well, that's just missing because it's CNN copy. After the vote, Pence sent a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying he would not invoke the 25th Amendment. Last week, I did not yield to pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority to determine the outcome of an election. I will not now yield to efforts in the House of Representatives to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation. Say what you want about Mike Pence, but the guy's brilliant. He's brilliant. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he has said nothing to add to the anti-Trump bias of the January 6th committee. So there you go. The filmmaker appeared Thursday behind closed doors for a deposition with the January 6th committee. A deposition. Is that getting their story straight? Well, let's ask the Republicans that were in the room that cross-examined the witness. Oh, that's right. There was no cross-examination. You know, I've done a couple of depositions in my life. And you know what? Both sides were represented. I had my lawyer. They had their lawyers. They asked me questions. There was cross-examination. There was give and take. And I won both times. Because I tell the truth. Because I am logical. Because I do think about other people. I don't let somebody's political agenda do my thinking for me. Anybody's political agenda. Especially the January 6th committee. And it's all right here in front of you. Holder, the filmmaker, that's the guy's name, was behind closed doors. So we have clips of this. This is a perfect example of what I'm telling you about. We have clips of this documentary. What about the other parts of the documentary? What do they show? Anybody? Oh, that's right. We don't know. Why don't we know? Well, because the documentary hasn't been seen yet. Only thing that's been seen is what's been used as trailer information for the documentary by the January 6th committee. And since a Hollywood producer is putting it all together, a former news executive for ABC News, since he's putting all this stuff together, why isn't it a trailer for the movie? That's what it is. This unfair garbage is going down in flames. More about that coming up in just a moment. The January 6th committee, this is from Rolling Stone. The January 6th committee subpoenaed documentary filmmaker Alex Holder in regard to footage and interview Holder and his team shot while following former President Donald Trump and his inner circle throughout the 2020 presidential campaign. Holder's company, AJH Films, confirmed to Rolling Stone that he had been subpoenaed and will sit for an interview with the panel on Thursday and has fully complied with all the committee requests. Trump's team was blindsided by the development, which was initially reported by Politico. Yeah. You see, when you're in court, right? Discovery is a process whereby you know what the other side is going to argue in court. Blindsiding is not part of that proceeding. Blindsiding is not a part of that proceeding. You have to tell people what you're going to talk about so they can provide an adequate defense. But the objective of this committee is not for Donald Trump to provide or have an adequate defense. The objective of this committee is to run Donald Trump over with a lynch mob. That's why I don't report it. Now, are you trusting my integrity? Yes. Is that trust justified? Only you know the answer to that. But I know the answer to it. In my heart, I know. If Donald Trump was actually guilty of inciting that riot, I would have reported it on this broadcast. I watched it. I watched what he said. I watched what Chuck Schumer said about the Supreme Court. I watched what Joe Biden said about the BLM riots and what Kamala Harris said about the BLM riots. And what I'm telling you is this hypocrisy is going to damage this nation. It's hypocrisy. And so here we are, once again, bits and pieces that serve the political agenda of the January 6th committee, as opposed to an actual examination of the facts. No facts, no need to report it on the Wells Report. There's more about this, and I'll tell you next. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for coming along with us today. So what's going on with the January 6th committee? Well, there's an old saying in showbiz. It says, leave them wanting more. The January 6th committee has a problem. The January 6th committee is essentially presenting most of the same information, the same suppositions, the same assertions that were made during the second impeachment of Donald Trump, an impeachment that was unsuccessful. And so what's going on? Well, things are beginning to bleed through from Democrats who are just as disgusted by this as everybody else that is disgusted by it. I'm not saying that everybody's disgusted by it. I'm just saying I'm just saying that there are Democrats that are disgusted by what the committee is doing. Politico correspondent Betsy Woodruff Swan reports that two Democrat lawmakers speaking candidly about how the electorate feels about January 6th, they have come up with the idea that no one gives a bleep about January 6th. No one does. Here in flyover country, in real America, all this is a pointless political exercise that only exposes the hypocrisy of the people foisting it on us. I haven't confirmed this, but I've heard that NBC broke away from the committee today after broadcasting wall to wall. Why? Because nobody cares. Nobody cares about it at all. All of this damning evidence is only damning themselves. During a panel discussion on Meet the Press Now, NBC anchor Chuck Todd cited a Quinnipiac poll that asked Americans if they thought that former President Donald Trump truly believed there was voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election. 43% of the respondents believe that Trump does believe his claims. I believe his claims. 48% say the president knowingly promotes falsehoods. You got to keep in mind the error rate, the percentage of error here. Todd went on to stress the party divide that showed 86% of Democrats claim that President Trump is lying. That's probably true. 77% of Republicans say he believes his voter fraud claims. I agree. I believe that Donald Trump believes everything he says. And he gets to believe anything he wants to. Is it pitiful delusion? Well, that's up to you to decide. Then Todd asks this question of Betsy Woodruff Swan, which brings me to the all-important question. Does the January 6th hearing break through at all? Is it more proof that it does not? Okay, the question is this making any kind of progress? And Swan responds, I don't think it does. I don't think it is making progress. I've talked to two separate Democrat members of Congress over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, I can't say who. Both of them have said nobody gives a bleep about January 6th when they're talking about their districts and the way that elections play out. The reality is it's an important issue, obviously, and they could have done it. Look, they could have done it so much better. If they'd have put the other side in, let me be perfectly candid here. If the January 6th committee really wanted to trample Trump, nice alliteration there, JD. What they should have done is they should have had the Republican Party involved from the get-go. Why? Why are you saying that, John David? Well, because the Republican Party will defend Donald Trump to the last. No, that's not the case. The Republican Party would take part in the actual lynching of Donald Trump, wouldn't they? Because that's what they did all during his presidency. The Republican Party is guilty of just as much sabotage of the Trump administration as Democrats. Then they would have honestly been able to say, both sides were presented, you decide. But they can't do that now. Why is that? Because politicians are stupid. That's why. Another reason to not have them running the country. Everybody in the United States, everyone in the United States has been raised on courtroom dramas where everybody gets to speak, both sides are represented, and then the jury comes up with a verdict. In this case, the jury are the people of the United States. But you only have one side of the argument. And people look at that and go, it's only one side of the argument. If they really wanted to hurt Trump, they'd have had both sides of the argument. Because as we know, and it may sound cynical, the Republican Party would have gladly participated in running Trump off the road, just like the Democrats are trying to do. As a matter of fact, the Republicans are actually very happy that they're not involved in this committee, because the committee is doing their work of running Trump off the road, and they can claim that they didn't have anything to do with it. Because what I'm discovering is that while the Democrat Party is anti-American, the Republican Party is ulterior. Think about that. One of these days we'll talk about it on the Wells Report. God bless you. I'm glad you were here. See you tomorrow. Well, all righty then. Okay, I'm glad you thought it didn't suck. Is that what you're trying to say? Because Isaac thought it sucked. He stomped off in a huff right before I burned him. Yeah. Let's see what else we got here. Ploy to attempt shame President Trump out of the picture and into the history books. A large group of idiots splintered from a large group of patriots made some very poor decisions. The real investigation should be into how it was not foreseen as possible and why there wasn't a force available to stop them. Boy, I tell you, Gavin, you really did get it right on the button. Nice job. All right, pal of mine. All right, wonderful people. I got to go. Take good care of yourselves, okay? And I'll see you again tomorrow for the Friday edition of the Wells Report. Can you believe it? 3 weeks. We've done this 3 weeks now, and still nobody's watching. But we're doing the best we can. I'm going to go now. Have yourself a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.